Imagine looking up at the sky, only to realize that every cloud, every gust of wind, and every storm has been orchestrated. You've unknowingly been living in a world where powerful elites, governments, corporations, shadowy figures control the weather itself. The rain, the droughts, the disasters, they aren't accidents. They control it all, and the terrifying truth? You have no idea what's coming next. Chapter 1. HAARP, the government's weather weapon. Imagine a machine hidden away in the frozen wilderness of Alaska that has the power to control the very skies above us. A machine so potent that it can reach into the ionosphere, the upper layer of our atmosphere, and manipulate it like a puppet master pulling invisible strings. According to some conspiracy theorists, this is not science fiction, but a terrifying reality, and it's called HAARP. The High-Frequency Active Auroral Research Program, or HAARP, was established in the early 1990s, officially as a joint research project involving the Air Force, Navy, and several universities. Its stated purpose was to study the ionosphere, a critical region for radio wave transmission. But this remote facility in Gacona, Alaska, quickly became the focal point for one of the most disturbing conspiracy theories of our time. The theory goes like this: HAARP is not merely a research facility, but a covert weather weapon. Using powerful radio frequency transmitters, HAARP can heat the ionosphere and bend its natural forces to control global weather patterns. Earthquakes, hurricanes, droughts, according to believers, HAARP can cause it all. And if HAARP can control the weather, then it has the power to wreak unimaginable devastation. But how much of this is true? How much is paranoia? To understand, we need to first look at what HAARP actually is. HAARP's physical form is not as imposing as its rumored capabilities suggest. It's a grid of antennas spread across 30 acres of land. At first glance, it looks like a massive radio station, or perhaps an eerily vacant power plant, standing silent in the cold Alaskan expanse. But these antennas are far from ordinary. HAARP uses high-frequency radio waves to interact with the ionosphere, the electrically charged part of Earth's atmosphere that starts about 50 miles above the surface. This region plays a critical role in communications, satellite systems, and navigation, as it reflects radio waves back to Earth, enabling long-distance communication. HAARP's goal, officially, was to understand how this layer functions and to improve communication technologies. Yet for all its scientific intent, HAARP's true nature seemed far more sinister to conspiracy theorists. They began to ask unsettling questions. Why did the U.S. military fund a research project focused on the ionosphere? Why was the facility located in such a remote area, far from the public eye? What could HAARP really do? Those who believe HAARP is a tool for global weather manipulation point to its ability to heat localized areas of the ionosphere. By concentrating radio waves on a specific spot, HAARP can temporarily alter the behavior of that section of the atmosphere. Theoretically, this could create pressure systems, shift jet streams, or disrupt natural weather patterns. The implications are chilling. With the right application, it's not just about creating rain in drought-stricken areas. What if HAARP could intensify hurricanes or steer them toward populated cities? What if it could generate earthquakes by disrupting Earth's electromagnetic field? What if it could cause catastrophic floods in enemy nations, or even droughts that cripple entire economies? In 2010, when Haiti was devastated by a massive earthquake, rumors began circulating almost immediately. Was it a natural disaster, or had HAARP played a role? The evidence was circumstantial. Strange anomalies in the atmosphere reported just before the quake, an unusual cloud formation resembling those seen during other suspected HAARP events. The devastation was real, but the cause remained shrouded in mystery. But earthquakes aren't the only disaster linked to HAARP. Hurricane Katrina, which left New Orleans in ruins in 2005, was also said to be a product of the project. The hurricane's ferocity, combined with peculiar cloud patterns and weather anomalies, gave rise to whispers that HAARP had somehow amplified the storm. Some theorists went so far as to suggest that Katrina had been intentionally directed toward the city as part of a larger government scheme. Despite the U.S. government's claims that HAARP was merely a scientific research station, these theories persisted. After all, why wouldn't a government want control over the weather? Weather control offers untold strategic advantages, being able to destroy an enemy's crops, flood their cities, or cripple their infrastructure without firing a single shot. Some believe that HAARP is just one part of a much larger program to dominate global weather systems, a shadowy effort led by elites and secret organizations. Consider the economic power that controlling the weather could bring. If a country could generate droughts in a competitor's farmland, or create perfect growing conditions for their own crops, they could destabilize global markets. Or worse, they could use weather as a form of silent warfare, crippling nations without leaving a trace. These theories draw heavily on the legacy of Operation Popeye, a real U.S. military project during the Vietnam War. In that operation, the U.S. extended the monsoon season over enemy supply routes using cloud seeding techniques, proving that weather manipulation was not just a concept, but a reality. This historical precedent has only fueled speculation that HAARP is the next evolution of that technology, far more advanced and far more dangerous. HAARP was officially shut down in 2014, but the theories around it remain as alive as ever. Some say the shutdown was a cover-up, and that HAARP's technology has merely been relocated or continued in secret. Others believe that the project was never truly about the ionosphere at all, that HAARP was simply a prototype for even larger weather control systems that now operate on a global scale. The most frightening aspect of this theory is not just the idea that governments or secret organizations can control the weather. It's the question of who controls these tools and to what end. If HAARP has the power to cause hurricanes, earthquakes, and droughts, who decides when and where to unleash these forces? Could such power ever truly be used responsibly? Chapter 2: Cloud Seeding, Engineering Droughts and Floods. The sky, vast and indifferent, has long been humanity's final frontier, an untamable force beyond our grasp. For millennia, we've watched the clouds roll in and out, praying for rain during times of drought and shelter during storms. But what if the skies weren't so indifferent after all? What if someone had found a way to manipulate them, to force the heavens to bend to their will? The answer, terrifyingly enough, lies in the quiet yet eerie practice of cloud seeding. Cloud seeding is not a fringe conspiracy or an arcane rumor. It's a very real technology, actively used by governments and corporations to influence weather patterns. On paper, it seems harmless enough, a method of dispersing chemicals like silver iodide or sodium chloride into clouds to encourage precipitation. Harmless until you start wondering about the other side of the coin. What if this technology isn't just about coaxing rain from reluctant clouds? What if it's being used to withhold rain, to cause droughts, or to turn storms into devastating floods? What if cloud seeding is not about balancing nature, but controlling it, bending it for profit, or worse, for power? At its core, cloud seeding appears deceptively simple. Small planes or rockets are sent into the sky, releasing microscopic particles into clouds. These particles act as nuclei around which moisture can condense, theoretically making it more likely for rain or snow to fall. Countries like China, the US, and even the United Arab Emirates have used cloud seeding to combat drought or to ensure clear weather for major events. But there's a dark undercurrent to the story of cloud seeding, a story that stretches back to the 1940s, when it was first developed. Even then, the line between helpful science and dangerous meddling was thin. Early experiments, like those conducted by General Electric in the 1940s, resulted in sudden, unexpected storms. These rainmakers began to realize they could alter weather patterns in ways far beyond what anyone had imagined. The world had discovered how to seed clouds, but had they opened Pandora's box? The idea of harnessing weather for human benefit is seductive. But imagine if that power were to fall into the wrong hands. The whispers began early, allegations that cloud seeding was being used not just to make rain, but to withhold it. In a world where water is one of the most valuable commodities, the idea of controlling rainfall opens the door to terrifying possibilities. What if a government could ensure its own crops thrive by redirecting storms and drying out the farmland of its rivals? The technology to do this exists, at least in theory. With enough cloud seeding in key areas, rain clouds could be nudged away from one region, leaving the earth parched and cracked. Meanwhile, elsewhere, the skies would open, and rain would fall in abundance, turning rival nations or regions into dust bowls while benefiting the chosen few. It's the ultimate power grab, controlling not just resources but the weather that creates them. When crops fail, economies collapse. And when economies collapse, so do governments. In the early 2000s, conspiracy theories about cloud seeding took a more sinister turn when parts of the United States experienced devastating droughts. In California, where water is worth its weight in gold, the idea that cloud seeding could have been responsible for the prolonged drought conditions started gaining traction. Why? Theorists asked, were there reports of cloud seeding in neighboring states? Yet California's skies remained empty. Some began to whisper that cloud seeding was being used strategically to dry up certain regions while funneling rain elsewhere. Could powerful agricultural conglomerates, or even the government, be manipulating the skies to their own advantage? The idea was unsettling, but not without precedent. During the Vietnam War, the U.S. government had conducted weather modification operations under Operation Popeye, seeding clouds over enemy territory to extend the monsoon season and flood supply routes. The military had used the weather as a weapon once before. Who was to say they, or others, weren't doing it again? Then there's the flip side of the coin: floods. Just as cloud seeding can withhold rain, it can also create too much of it. The delicate balance of nature can be pushed too far, with devastating consequences. Rumors began to circulate that cloud seeding wasn't just being used to bring rain to dry areas, but to intensify storms, turning normal weather patterns into monstrous floods. In 2019, flash floods in Texas and parts of the Midwest sparked a wave of online theories. News of cloud seeding operations in neighboring regions led some to question whether these floods had been natural at all. Could cloud seeding have backfired, or worse, been used deliberately to cause these catastrophic weather events? Entire towns were submerged, homes destroyed, lives lost. Was this the cost of tampering with the atmosphere? The thing about manipulating the weather is that it's a gamble. Nature has a way of balancing itself, and when humans step in to play God, the results can be unpredictable. A seeded cloud may bring the rain you need, or it may turn a storm into a disaster. The reality of cloud seeding lies somewhere in the gray space between scientific advancement and terrifying abuse of power. What was once seen as a tool to help humanity survive droughts and feed growing populations is now viewed with suspicion. Are we really just helping the weather along, or are we playing a dangerous game of control? The scariest part? It's not clear where the line is anymore. Cloud seeding is used openly, but the consequences, both intentional and accidental, are harder to track. Could an innocent-seeming project to bring rain to one area cause disaster in another? Could those in power be deliberately manipulating the weather for political or economic gain? As governments and corporations continue to experiment with cloud seeding, the question becomes, who decides how the weather is used? And what happens when that power is abused? Today, cloud seeding is used in over 50 countries. Its potential for good is vast, but so is its potential for destruction. If someone could control when and where the rain falls, who benefits? And more chillingly, who suffers? The sky above is no longer a distant, untouchable realm. It's a battlefield, an invisible war over resources, profit, and control. Cloud seeding may be the technology of the future, but it's also a weapon in the making, one that could turn the most fundamental forces of nature against us. Chapter 3: Chemtrails Poisoning the Atmosphere. Look up. The sky, a brilliant canvas of blue, is suddenly streaked with long, white lines stretching from horizon to horizon. Harmless contrails, condensed water vapor left behind by planes, or so we've been told. But to the believers of one of the most chilling modern conspiracies, these trails aren't innocent at all. They're not contrails, they're chemtrails, sinister, toxic lines in the sky, carrying chemicals to alter the weather, poison the population, or worse. What if, instead of simply dissipating into the atmosphere, those trails hung in the air, spreading microscopic particles that infiltrated our lungs, our water, our soil? What if the very air we breathe was laced with a toxic cocktail of chemicals part of a larger plan to control not just the climate, but us. This is the terrifying theory behind chemtrails, a belief that the government, or perhaps even shadowy elites, are spraying dangerous chemicals into the atmosphere for unknown but deeply nefarious purposes. To most, the thin white streaks left behind by aircraft are nothing more than contrails, short for condensation trails, caused by the moisture in jet exhaust rapidly cooling in the cold upper atmosphere. It's a common phenomenon, seen in skies all around the world. The trails are supposed to be harmless, vanishing quickly as they dissolve into the air. But what if they don't vanish? What if, instead, they linger for hours, expanding into a hazy veil that spreads across the sky, creating a strange, unnatural cloud cover? To chemtrail believers, this is no accident. They argue that these long-lasting trails are evidence of something far more dangerous, an intentional release of chemicals into the atmosphere. The question that haunts them is simple, yet terrifying. Why? Theories about chemtrails vary, but they all center around the idea that someone, somewhere, is using the sky as a delivery system for secretive and deadly programs. Some believe the goal is climate control, an effort to counteract global warming or manipulate weather patterns for economic or political advantage. According to this theory, the chemicals released into the atmosphere are designed to reflect sunlight, cooling the Earth in a dangerous and unregulated form of geoengineering. But others fear something far darker. They believe chemtrails are being used to spread disease, weaken immune systems, and even alter human behavior. The notion that mind control could be achieved through chemicals dispersed in the air has roots in Cold War-era paranoia, when governments experimented with covert biological and chemical warfare. If mind control was a goal, then what's to stop it from being a goal now? In their view, the government or some hidden cabal could be using chemtrails to subtly influence the population, keeping people docile, sick, or simply unaware of what's really happening in the world. The chemicals, they say, are making us forget, making us compliant, and even making us sick, just enough to keep us distracted but not enough to cause mass panic. For years, chemtrail theorists have combed the skies, searching for evidence. They point to the strange patterns in the clouds, the unusual grid-like formations that appear far too deliberate to be natural. They take photographs and videos of planes crisscrossing the skies, leaving behind thick, persistent trails that don't behave like normal contrails. Why? They ask, do some planes leave short-lived vapor trails that vanish within minutes, while others create trails that linger for hours, growing wider and denser, eventually spreading out to form a thin, misty layer over entire cities? Then there's the evidence found closer to home. Mysterious fibers, powders, and debris falling from the sky in the wake of these chemtrails. Residents in areas where these trails appear frequently report strange health problems, persistent coughing, fatigue, unexplained rashes, and respiratory issues. Could these be signs of chemical exposure? To believers, it's proof that something dangerous is happening above our heads, even if we can't see it with the naked eye. Some of the chemicals believed to be present in chemtrails include heavy metals like aluminum, barium, and strontium, elements that, in high concentrations, can have severe impacts on health and the environment. Aluminum, in particular, is often cited as a neurotoxin linked to Alzheimer's disease and other cognitive disorders. Is it a coincidence that rates of such illnesses are on the rise? Or is something far more sinister at play? Imagine waking up one morning, looking out your window, and noticing the sky covered with those familiar streaks. You dismiss it, just another day, just another jet passing overhead. But then, over time, you start feeling different. You're more tired than usual, your head aches for no reason, and a strange cough lingers in your throat. Your neighbors are feeling it too. Sickness is spreading through the community, subtle but undeniable. Could it be the chemtrails? What if, every time we see those streaks overhead, we're witnessing a silent attack, an invisible poison that's slowly seeping into our bodies? Many chemtrail theorists claim that the chemicals being sprayed have profound and long-term effects on human health. Chronic fatigue, respiratory problems, and weakened immune systems are just the beginning. Some even suggest that the chemicals could be designed to sterilize populations, control birth rates, or make us more susceptible to illnesses that line the pockets of pharmaceutical companies. The idea is as chilling as it is plausible. If you can't control people through traditional means, you control them by weakening them slowly, silently, through the very air they breathe. Governments and scientific institutions around the world have repeatedly denied the existence of chemtrails, dismissing the theory as baseless paranoia. Official statements claim that what people are seeing are normal contrails, and any health issues are the result of other environmental factors. But for many, these denials only add to the suspicion. Why? They ask, would the government admit to such a dark and dangerous program? After all, the logic goes, if they're willing to secretly spray chemicals into the sky, what's to stop them from lying about it? And so, the fear grows. In the absence of clear answers, the sky becomes a battleground between those who trust the explanations and those who see them as part of a larger cover-up. Chapter 4. Operation Popeye. Vietnam's Monsoon Warfare. Imagine fighting in a war where the sky itself becomes a weapon, where the rain, rather than providing relief, becomes an unrelenting force designed to destroy you, drowning your supplies, washing away your defenses. During the Vietnam War, this nightmare became a terrifying reality. It was called Operation Popeye, and it wasn't just a theory. It was a classified U.S. military operation that weaponized the weather. For 5 years, starting in 1967, the United States government manipulated the monsoon season over Southeast Asia, using cloud seeding techniques to extend rainfall and flood enemy supply routes. The goal? To turn nature itself against the North Vietnamese forces and the Ho Chi Minh Trail, their crucial supply line. In an already devastating war, Operation Popeye opened a new front, one that took place not on the ground, but in the sky. The idea of controlling the weather for military purposes might sound like something ripped from the pages of a science fiction novel. But for the U.S. military, it was all too real. By the mid-1960s, the war in Vietnam had become a brutal and grinding conflict with no clear end in sight. The Ho Chi Minh Trail, an intricate network of paths and tunnels running through Laos, Cambodia, and Vietnam, was a lifeline for the North Vietnamese, allowing them to move troops, weapons, and supplies. If the U.S. could disrupt this vital artery, they might gain the upper hand. But how do you attack a trail that weaves through dense jungles and mountainous terrain, nearly impervious to bombing or ground assaults? The answer came in the form of a secret, experimental program, weather modification. By using cloud seeding, injecting clouds with silver iodide particles to encourage rainfall, the U.S. military sought to create a never-ending monsoon over the trail, turning it into a quagmire of mud, rendering it impassable. For 5 years, from March 20th, 1967, to July 5th, 1972, this quiet, clandestine war raged in the skies. The code name was Operation Popeye, and its mission was simple: make mud, not war. But the implications were far from simple. With weather as a weapon, the boundaries of warfare had been pushed into unsettling new territory. Rain is a force of nature, unpredictable, untamable, and often destructive. But Operation Popeye sought to harness that power, using it as a tool of war. The operation's tactics were chilling in their simplicity. Military planes flew over targeted areas, releasing silver iodide particles into clouds. These particles acted as nuclei for moisture, causing clouds to condense and produce rain. By repeatedly seeding clouds over the Ho Chi Minh Trail, the U.S. military was able to extend the monsoon season, transforming the landscape into a sodden mess. The results were devastating. Roads turned into rivers of mud, bridges washed away, and supply convoys bogged down in the mire. The once hidden trails that crisscrossed the jungles were exposed, rendered useless by the relentless downpour. For the soldiers on the ground, the rain became an enemy unto itself, constant, oppressive, and deadly. But beyond the immediate tactical benefits, Operation Popeye opened up a Pandora's box of ethical and environmental questions. The manipulation of weather for military purposes blurred the line between warfare and environmental destruction. The rain, once a natural phenomenon, was now a weapon of war. And like any weapon, it didn't discriminate between combatant and civilian. For years, the true nature of Operation Popeye remained hidden from the public. It was a classified operation, known only to a select few within the military and government. But whispers of weather manipulation began to circulate. Soldiers and civilians alike noticed the strange, persistent rain over key areas of the conflict zone. Questions began to arise, but official channels denied any wrongdoing. It wasn't until the mid-1970s when a series of leaked documents and congressional hearings exposed the full scope of Operation Popeye that the truth came to light. The U.S. government had been manipulating the weather, intentionally extending the monsoon season to disrupt enemy forces. The revelations were met with shock and outrage, not just because of the ethical implications, but because they confirmed a horrifying new reality: weather could be weaponized. For many, Operation Popeye marked a turning point in how they viewed the powers that be. If the government could secretly control the weather for years without the public's knowledge, what else could they be doing behind closed doors? Operation Popeye didn't just change the way wars were fought. It ignited a firestorm of conspiracy theories that would continue to burn for decades. The idea that governments could control the weather, once the stuff of science fiction, now seemed all too real. If they had done it in Vietnam, who was to say they weren't still doing it now on a larger and more terrifying scale? In the years that followed, the specter of weather manipulation lingered in the public consciousness. Rumors of clandestine weather warfare programs began to circulate, fueled by stories of unusual weather patterns, devastating storms, and unexplained environmental phenomena. From hurricanes to droughts, every natural disaster became a potential weapon, controlled by unseen hands. Some theorists claim that weather modification programs like Operation Popeye never ended. They just went underground. They point to strange cloud formations, unusual rain patterns, and unexplained flooding as evidence that governments around the world are still tampering with the atmosphere. To them, the sky is no longer a neutral force, it's a battleground, and we're all caught in the crossfire. The ethical implications of Operation Popeye were profound. The manipulation of weather for military gain raises questions about the limits of human intervention in nature. Where does the line between legitimate military strategy and environmental terrorism lie? Is it ever justifiable to weaponize the elements, knowing that the effects could be far-reaching and uncontrollable? For the people living in the affected areas, Operation Popeye was nothing short of environmental devastation. The prolonged monsoon season caused widespread flooding, destroyed crops, and displaced thousands of civilians. The jungles of Vietnam were turned into swamps, and the ecosystems that once thrived were left to rot in the perpetual rain. The unintended consequences of weather manipulation were severe, and they serve as a grim reminder that nature, once tampered with, can unleash forces far beyond our control. In the years since Operation Popeye, weather manipulation has remained a shadowy and controversial topic. While official programs like Popeye may have ended, the technology and knowledge to control the weather still exist. And for many, the legacy of Popeye looms large, a reminder that the sky itself can be turned into a weapon. As we look up at the clouds, the question remains: who controls the weather? And if they can control it, what are they doing with that power? Operation Popeye showed us that the sky is no longer a neutral space. It's a battlefield, one where the rain can be turned against us, and where the forces of nature are no longer beyond human reach. The monsoon rains of Vietnam may have stopped, but the fear of weather warfare endures. Because once the skies are weaponized, they can never truly be trusted again. Chapter 5: Hurricanes and Earthquakes, Natural Disasters or Man-Made Events. The wind howls and the ground trembles. A hurricane barrels toward the coast with terrifying force, while somewhere, miles beneath the surface, tectonic plates shift violently, sending shockwaves across the earth. It's easy to believe these are the raw, uncontrollable powers of nature. But what if they're not? What if some of the deadliest disasters in modern history, from Hurricane Katrina to the 2004 Indian Ocean tsunami, weren't accidents at all? What if they were deliberate, engineered by governments or shadowy organizations for reasons we can barely begin to comprehend? This is the chilling world of weather and earthquake manipulation, where hurricanes are intensified on command and earthquakes are triggered at will. Some claim this terrifying technology already exists, and the implications are horrifying. Could the very forces of nature be weaponized against us? It was August 2005 when the world watched in horror as Hurricane Katrina ravaged the Gulf Coast of the United States, leaving a trail of destruction in its wake. New Orleans was flooded, homes were destroyed, and lives were lost. But as the storm clouds cleared and the floodwaters receded, whispers began to surface. Whispers that Katrina wasn't just a natural disaster, but something far more sinister. Some conspiracy theorists argue that Hurricane Katrina was artificially intensified or even steered to target the vulnerable city of New Orleans. The theory goes like this. Using advanced weather manipulation technology, possibly HAARP or similar secret programs, the storm was engineered to grow into a Category 5 hurricane and directed toward the Gulf Coast, where it would wreak the most havoc. Why? Theories range from political motives to economic interests, with some suggesting that the government wanted to depopulate New Orleans or clear land for development. Others believe Katrina was a test, a way to see how effective weather manipulation could be as a weapon, how a city could be crippled not by bombs or bullets, but by wind and water. And what about the bizarre, inexplicable behavior of the storm? Many remember how Hurricane Katrina seemed to change course unexpectedly, how it intensified with unnatural speed before slamming into the coast. To those who believe in weather warfare, these are the fingerprints of human interference. The question that haunts them is, who was pulling the strings? On December 26, 2004, the world was plunged into chaos when a massive undersea earthquake triggered a tsunami in the Indian Ocean, devastating the coastlines of Indonesia, Thailand, Sri Lanka, and beyond. Hundreds of thousands of people perished in the waves, and entire communities were wiped out in a matter of hours. But even in the midst of this tragedy, some began to ask, could this disaster have been man-made? The 2004 tsunami, according to certain theorists, was no mere geological event. Some believe that the earthquake was triggered intentionally, perhaps by underground nuclear detonations or other clandestine military experiments designed to test seismic weaponry. The idea that humans could intentionally trigger earthquakes might sound far-fetched, but it's rooted in a disturbing possibility that by targeting fault lines with precision detonations or energy pulses, governments or secret organizations could unleash destruction on an unimaginable scale. Some point to strange anomalies surrounding the earthquake, including reports of unexplained military activity in the region and unusual seismic readings in the days leading up to the disaster. Could these have been signs of a human hand behind the tragedy? And if so, what was the purpose? Was it a test of technology, a warning shot in an unseen global conflict, or something even darker, a deliberate act of devastation to reshape geopolitical or economic landscapes? When it comes to theories of man-made hurricanes and earthquakes, one name comes up time and again: HAARP. Officially, HAARP, the High-Frequency Active Auroral Research Program, was designed for scientific purposes to study the ionosphere and improve communication systems. But to many conspiracy theorists, HAARP is something far more dangerous, a top-secret weapon capable of manipulating the weather and triggering natural disasters on demand. According to this theory, HAARP's massive antenna array, which pumps high-frequency radio waves into the ionosphere, can disrupt weather patterns, steer storms, and even cause earthquakes. The energy it generates, they claim, can be directed to specific areas of the Earth's atmosphere, creating changes that ripple down to the surface in the form of extreme weather events or seismic disturbances. In the years following Hurricane Katrina and the 2004 tsunami, HAARP became a central figure in many conspiracy theories. Some believe the program was used to amplify the intensity of these disasters, pushing natural phenomena beyond their limits to achieve calculated destruction. The idea that a government facility in remote Alaska could influence global weather patterns or trigger earthquakes might sound absurd, but for those who see HAARP as a tool of hidden powers, the implications are terrifying. What if we are no longer at the mercy of nature, but at the mercy of those who can control it? The concept of using seismic weapons, devices that can trigger earthquakes, isn't new. During the Cold War, both the United States and the Soviet Union explored the possibility of creating weapons that could harness the Earth's own tectonic forces for destructive purposes. By detonating explosives along fault lines or using directed energy to destabilize seismic zones, these weapons could theoretically cause earthquakes with devastating precision. For years, these ideas were dismissed as the stuff of science fiction, but the technology may be more advanced than we think. Some theorists point to strange patterns in recent earthquake activity, including clusters of quakes in geopolitically sensitive areas, as evidence that seismic weapons are being tested or deployed in secret. Others believe that certain earthquakes, such as the devastating 2010 Haiti quake, were intentionally triggered as part of covert military operations or global power plays. The technology required to create man-made earthquakes may be hidden from public view, but if it exists, the potential for destruction is terrifying. Imagine a world where earthquakes are no longer natural disasters, but weapons of war, where cities can be reduced to rubble with the press of a button and nations can be brought to their knees by a carefully placed tremor. As technology continues to advance, the possibility of controlling natural disasters becomes less far-fetched and more terrifyingly real. From hurricanes to earthquakes, the idea that governments or secret organizations could unleash the forces of nature for their own purposes raises profound questions about the future of warfare and power. In this world, no one is safe. A storm could be brewing off the coast, not a product of shifting weather patterns, but of human intent. A tremor could shake the ground beneath your feet, not caused by the shifting of tectonic plates, but by an unseen hand. If the past has shown us anything, it's that the boundaries of human intervention in nature are constantly expanding. And in this dangerous new frontier, the line between natural and man-made disasters may already be blurred beyond recognition. The next time a hurricane roars in from the sea, or the earth quakes violently beneath you, ask yourself, was this nature's wrath or someone's twisted design? Because in a world where technology can command the skies and the ground itself, we might never know the truth. Chapter 6: Geoengineering, Climate Control on a Global Scale. The sky no longer seems trustworthy. Its once pristine blue hue is now streaked with long, unnatural lines of white, trails that stretch out like the fingers of a giant hand, reaching across the heavens. These lines linger for hours, slowly spreading until they form a hazy veil over the sun. People look up and wonder, what are they really doing to our atmosphere? What if the most terrifying enemy isn't something we can see coming, but something we breathe in, something above us, invisible and all-encompassing? This is the unsettling world of geoengineering, where entire weather systems and global climates are tampered with, where those in power may be playing God with the planet's atmosphere. Officially, geoengineering is a proposed solution to combat climate change, a way to intervene and stabilize Earth's environment. But to many, this idea is just a front, a smokescreen for a far darker truth. What if these large-scale interventions are already happening, and the consequences are far worse than anyone dares to admit? The theory behind geoengineering seems simple. If humanity is causing the Earth to heat up through greenhouse gas emissions, then maybe we can cool it back down by manipulating the planet's natural systems. One of the most common proposals is solar radiation management, where aerosols, tiny particles of sulfur dioxide, or other reflective materials are injected into the stratosphere to reflect sunlight away from the Earth, mimicking the cooling effect of volcanic eruptions. On paper, it sounds like a last-ditch effort to save the planet. By reflecting sunlight, we could theoretically reduce global temperatures, halting or even reversing the effects of climate change. Proponents argue that geoengineering could buy humanity precious time to cut emissions and develop cleaner energy sources. But what they don't often mention are the risks, the unintended or perhaps intended consequences of tampering with something as delicate and complex as the Earth's atmosphere. What if geoengineering isn't just a future possibility, but a present-day reality? Some conspiracy theorists believe that governments and powerful corporations are already using geoengineering techniques to manipulate the climate on a massive scale, without the public's knowledge or consent. They point to those long, white trails in the sky, often referred to as chemtrails, as evidence of secret programs designed to alter the atmosphere. While the official explanation for these trails is that they are simply contrails, harmless vapor trails left by airplanes, skeptics aren't convinced. To them, these trails are laced with chemicals, intentionally released to modify the climate. But why? Theories range from attempts to control global weather patterns to experiments aimed at controlling populations through environmental manipulation. The idea that geoengineering could be used for nefarious purposes is terrifying. If someone had the power to control the climate, they would also have the power to cause droughts, floods, or crop failures, wielding nature itself as a weapon. Could this technology be in the hands of those willing to use it for personal gain, political leverage, or worse? Even if geoengineering is implemented with the best of intentions, the potential for disaster is enormous. The Earth's climate is a finely tuned system with countless interdependent variables. Altering one part of that system could have cascading effects, leading to unforeseen and potentially catastrophic consequences. Imagine triggering an endless drought in one region while causing relentless storms in another. The delicate balance that sustains life on Earth could be irreparably disturbed. But what if these consequences aren't unforeseen? Some theorists believe that the side effects of geoengineering, such as abnormal weather patterns and extreme events, are not accidental, but intentional. The idea is chilling. Those in control of geoengineering could be using it to create chaos, manipulating weather systems for profit or power. A sudden drought could devastate a region's agriculture, driving up food prices and allowing corporate interests to profit from scarcity. A storm that wipes out coastal infrastructure could create opportunities for reconstruction contracts or shift political dynamics in favor of those behind the scenes. In this version of reality, every disaster becomes suspect. Is that hurricane bearing down on your city a natural phenomenon or a manufactured event? Are the floods ravaging your community part of a larger plan? The very uncertainty of it all breeds a pervasive sense of dread, a fear that no matter where you are at the mercy of forces beyond your control, forces that may not have your best interests in mind. To truly understand the fear surrounding geoengineering, you have to think on a global scale. Imagine a world where governments and corporations, vying for control of precious resources, are secretly engaged in a high-stakes game of weather warfare. By altering the climate, they could gain the upper hand in trade negotiations, military conflicts, or even population control. For example, by causing droughts or floods in strategic regions, a government could destabilize its enemies without ever firing a shot. Entire economies could be crippled by food shortages, forcing nations to submit to political demands or risk collapse. In this dark vision of the future, geoengineering isn't about saving the planet, it's about controlling it. Some even believe that the recent increase in extreme weather events, unprecedented hurricanes, wildfires, and floods are not random occurrences, but evidence that this global chess game is already underway. The question is no longer if geoengineering is happening, but who is behind it and what their ultimate goal might be. As the debate over geoengineering continues, one thing is clear: the stakes couldn't be higher. The potential for environmental manipulation on a global scale presents risks that humanity may not be prepared to face. Even if the goal is to prevent climate catastrophe, the road to hell is often paved with good intentions. What happens when the system breaks, when the climate reacts in ways no one could have predicted? And then there's the terrifying possibility that the system isn't breaking, but functioning exactly as planned by those who seek to profit from chaos. In this scenario, the disasters we see on the news, uncontrollable wildfires, unseasonal snowstorms, droughts that last for years, aren't just random acts of nature. They are the results of deliberate manipulation, carried out in the shadows by those who hold the levers of power. The scariest part of geoengineering isn't the idea that it could one day be used to control the climate. It's the possibility that it's already happening, right now, above our heads, and we're powerless to stop it. If geoengineering is real, it's the ultimate form of control. Those who command the weather command the future, shaping the world according to their own designs. And for the rest of us, we're left watching the sky, wondering what's coming next. As the atmosphere becomes a battleground and the climate a weapon, one truth becomes clear. We are no longer simply at the mercy of nature. Now, we are at the mercy of those who seek to control it. And us. Chapter 7. The Global Weather Control Cabal. Who's really in charge? Beneath the swirl of clouds and the rolling thunder, in the deepest, darkest corners of power, there lies a secret cabal. They are the unseen hands that pull the strings of global weather manipulation, orchestrating storms, droughts, and natural disasters with cold precision. They have no borders, no allegiance to any one country. Their loyalty lies in their pursuit of total control over the planet. And they know the most effective way to control humanity is through the very air we breathe and the sky we live under. For years, conspiracy theorists have whispered about this elite group, those who sit in luxurious, shadowy rooms, planning how to bend the world's climate to their will. They are the architects of a terrifying vision, a future where every hurricane, every earthquake, every drop of rain is dictated by their command. But who are they? And what do they want? To understand the true scope of this global weather control conspiracy, we must first acknowledge the key players. Some believe that at the top of this hierarchy sits the Bilderberg Group, a secretive organization of the world's most powerful political figures, business leaders, and royalty. The annual meetings of the Bilderberg Group are infamous for their cloak of secrecy, and many believe that behind closed doors, these elites are discussing far more than economic policy or diplomatic strategy. According to some, they are discussing how to control the very elements. But the Bilderberg Group isn't the only suspect. Other theorists point to the Council on Foreign Relations, the Trilateral Commission, or even deeper, darker organizations, the Illuminati, as the true masterminds behind weather manipulation. These organizations, theorists claim, use weather control not only to influence politics, but to reshape the global economy. Imagine being able to cripple a rival nation's food supply by triggering a drought. Or imagine the power that comes with the ability to unleash a flood, erasing entire infrastructures and leaving only desperation and dependency. To those in control, the weather becomes a tool of manipulation, a means to control populations and topple governments without ever firing a shot. But governments and global elite organizations aren't the only ones allegedly pulling the strings. The fingerprints of corporate interests are all over this dark conspiracy. After all, where there's profit to be made, the most powerful corporations are never far behind. Some believe that a select group of multinational companies are deeply invested in weather manipulation technology, and they stand to gain the most from the havoc it wreaks. Take agribusiness giants. If you can control the weather, you can control the world's food supply. By manipulating the climate, these corporations could create artificial scarcity, driving up the price of crops and increasing their profits. Meanwhile, small farmers, the lifeblood of many nations, are left to suffer as droughts, floods, and unpredictable weather patterns destroy their livelihoods. Then there's big oil, which may have a stake in ensuring that climate change continues unabated or at least unpredictable, creating a perpetual demand for fossil fuels. As renewable energy grows stronger, weather manipulation could be the tool they use to keep the world dependent on oil and gas. By controlling the climate, they control the future of energy and the future of humanity. But the most terrifying theory is that defense contractors, the same companies that build the world's most powerful weapons, are deeply involved in the development of weather manipulation technologies. For them, weather is the ultimate weapon, one that can devastate an entire region without leaving a trace. Imagine being able to cause a drought so severe that it leads to a civil war, or creating a storm so devastating that it forces a government to collapse. In the hands of these corporations, the line between war and peace has blurred, and the battlefield is now the sky above us. But what is the end game for those controlling the weather? Is it simply about power and profit? Or is there something even more sinister at play? Some theorists argue that weather manipulation is part of a much larger global agenda, a new world order that seeks to reshape the world according to the desires of a select few. By controlling the weather, these elites could destabilize economies, displace populations, and create chaos that only they have the power to fix. And in the midst of that chaos, they could seize more control, implementing policies and laws that strip away individual freedoms under the guise of saving the planet or preserving security. This agenda isn't just about political or financial control. It's about total control. By manipulating the climate, these elites could create crises that would justify new global governance, new treaties, and even new societal structures. Imagine a world where every country is at the mercy of a handful of individuals who decide when it rains, when it snows, and when the sun shines. Imagine living in a world where every natural disaster is orchestrated for a hidden purpose, driving people into submission, forcing them to beg for solutions from those who caused the problem in the first place. In this future, we are all pawns in a global game of chess, where every move has been planned, every catastrophe calculated. And the most terrifying part? We don't even realize we're playing. As we examine all the pieces, a chilling picture begins to form. From HAARP's mysterious experiments in the ionosphere, to cloud seeding that alters precipitation patterns, to geoengineering that reflects sunlight with aerosol sprays, these aren't isolated phenomena. They are threads in a much larger tapestry, woven together by those who wish to control the very fate of the planet. And at the center of it all is the belief that weather manipulation isn't just possible, it's happening. Right now, as you read this, there are forces at work manipulating the skies, steering hurricanes, triggering earthquakes, and altering global weather patterns for purposes that go far beyond the common good. The storms that destroy cities, the droughts that ravage farmlands, the unpredictable swings in climate, are these the result of natural forces? Or are they the calculated actions of a hidden cabal? One thing is certain. If even a fraction of these theories are true, we are living in a world where the weather itself has become a weapon, where the forces of nature are no longer beyond human reach, and where the true powers that govern the earth are hidden in the shadows. They pull the strings of storms, they control the tides, and they decide our fate with the twist of a dial or the flip of a switch. The sky above us, once a symbol of freedom and the natural order, is now their playground, and we, the people below, are just pawns in their terrifying game of global control.